everyone, I'm Lily, and I'm super excited to have you here. Welcome to our channel, Easy Peasy English. If you want to learn English the easy way and speak confidently in real life, you're in the right place. Let's get started with Ryan before you go.
Hi guys, I'm Ryan.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
You know, if you've ever tried to speak a new language, you probably recognize this exact paralyzing feeling. You're just standing there, someone asks you a question in English, and suddenly your brain turns into this frantic, overworked switchboard operator.
Oh yeah, it's a very real panic.
Right, like you hear the English word, you have to manually route it to your native language just to understand it. Then you formulate a response in your native language, route that back into English, and then finally you open your mouth to speak.
And by then, the moment is gone. It is just an immense cognitive load. Running two distinct linguistic operating systems at the exact same time it's exhausting for the brain.
Exactly. It inherently creates this bottleneck.
Yeah.
And it's frustratingly slow. By the time you actually process the input and generate the output, the person you're talking to is already looking at you, waiting, and you're just trapped in your own mental switchboard.
Yeah, you're stuck in the middleman phase.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into a guide that is entirely focused on dismantling that exact switchboard. We're going to extract a practical, genuinely beginner-friendly framework for breaking the translation habit once and for all.
Which is so needed because people get really stuck on that habit.
They really do. So we're looking at the cognitive mechanics of, actually thinking in English, specific ways to practice speaking alone, a super efficient 10-minute daily routine. And this is my favorite part, the science of turning your mistakes into accelerated growth.
It's a great roadmap. And, the foundational issue we really have to address before anyone can speak fluently out loud is what's happening quietly inside the head.
Right, the internal monologue.
Exactly. Yeah. The ultimate goal, as outlined in our sources today, is to train the brain to think exclusively in English, bypassing the native language entirely from day one.
Because the source material really highlights that translating in your head is literally, quote, hard work for the brain. It completely bogs down your processing speed.
It does. It slows everything to a crawl.
So to get to that state where English feels natural, the guide suggests starting with something it calls micro-sentences, which is instead of just looking at an object and thinking of an isolated vocabulary word like pen, you actively form a tiny, complete thought.
Yeah, you give it context. So instead of just thinking pen, you think, this is my pen, or, my pen is blue.
Like putting mental sticky notes on everything around you.
Pretty much. The examples they give are super grounded in just daily life. When you wake up, you think, I wake up, I'm hungry, I want coffee.
Oh, yeah, essentials.
Right. And when you go to the bathroom, you think, I brush my teeth, the water is cold, or my personal favorite from the text, looking in the mirror and thinking, I am very handsome.
Hey, we could all use a little morning affirmation, right?
Absolutely.
But okay, looking at this from the perspective of an adult English student, I do have to push back a little on the utility of this.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, if someone's ultimate goal is to, say, lead a boardroom presentation in English, or discuss complex political ideas with their colleagues, isn't thinking the water is cold kind of beneath them? It feels like we're asking an adult to revert to a child's level of cognition.
I get why you'd say that. It does feel reductive on the surface. But if we look at the actual neurology of language acquisition, this beginner technique is highly strategic.
Really? How so?
Because fluency, at least initially, is not about the complexity of your vocabulary. It's strictly about the speed of your retrieval.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so when you feel the cold water on your hands in the morning and you form the thought the water is cold directly in English, you are physically building a brand new neural pathway.
So you're connecting the physical sensation directly to the English output,
right,
entirely skipping your native language.
Exactly. And that direct connection is the actual infrastructure of fluency. If you try to jump straight to boardroom presentations, your brain just hasn't built those direct pathways yet.
So it panics and falls back on the translation switchboard.
Right. It falls back on the native language to do the heavy lifting, and you're right back to being that overworked operator. These simple micro-sentences, they train the brain to initiate thought in English without triggering that translation reflex at all.
Okay, wow, that makes the internal monologue piece really clear. You build the pathways with simple, direct connections. But, the internal architecture is kind of useless if the initial input you're getting is flawed.
You mean what you're listening to and watching?
Right, because you can't output English if you aren't feeding the brain the right raw material first.
Yeah.
And the source divides this input strategy into two distinct channels, auditory and visual.
Yeah, let's look at the auditory component first. It focuses heavily on what the guide calls easy English.
Easy English, okay.
The objective here isn't deep comprehension of complex philosophical topics. It's pattern recognition. You want the brain to absorb grammatical rhythms, things like, I am, you are, he has.
And they specifically point to simple pop songs as highly effective input for this, which I thought was fascinating.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it. Pop songs are engineered to be catchy.
Which really just means they're incredibly repetitive.
Exactly. The guide actually references the lyric, "I love you like a love song, baby," to illustrate this. Because a phrase like that repeats dozens of times in a 3-minute window, it leverages a concept known as statistical learning.
Statistical learning? Wait, what's that?
Basically, the brain is constantly tracking the frequency of patterns it encounters in the wild. When it hears the same syntactic structure over and over and over in a song, it begins to automate that structure.
Oh, so without you ever needing to open a grammar textbook or explicitly study the rules?
It just absorbs it. Podcasts aimed at learners function similarly, providing a steady stream of those recognizable patterns.
I am realizing, though, that just listening to audio still leaves this cognitive vacuum where the brain might secretly try to translate.
How do you mean?
Like, if I hear a podcast say the word tomato, I might still picture the word for tomato in my native language in my head. But the second input channel they talk about, watching visual media, seems to solve that completely.
It definitely addresses the translation vacuum directly. But there is a major caveat in the source material regarding exactly what kind of visual media you should be consuming.
Right, because the instinct for a lot of learners is to jump straight into watching popular Hollywood movies or hit television shows.
Which is a mistake.
Yeah.
The guide heavily warns against that, describing the words in movies as flying by like fish, 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 fish.
That's such a great visual.
Yeah. The dialogue is simply too fast, the vocabulary is way too broad, and the learner just gets completely lost and frustrated. The cognitive load is just too high.
So what's the alternative? What should we be watching?
The strategy is to consume simple videos about topics you genuinely enjoy. Your hobbies, basically.
Okay, so if you love cooking, you watch cooking videos.
Exactly. If you love sports, you watch football highlights. They also highlight travel videos about Paris is a great example.
Let's trace the mechanism of that, like why a cooking video works better than a dedicated grammar lesson. Because it's like a diet, right? If you consume media that's too complex, you just get mental indigestion.
That's a perfect analogy.
So if I'm watching a chef and they say out loud, "I see the tomato, I add salt," while I am physically watching them slice a bright red tomato and sprinkle white salt on it, my brain doesn't need to translate the word tomato to my native language to understand what's happening.
No, because the meaning is already provided by the visual context right in front of you.
Wow.
You are mapping the English sound directly onto the visual cortex's representation of the action. This is the absolute crux of bypassing that translation phase we talked about.
You're anchoring the vocabulary in a real-world visual context.
And because it's a topic you actually enjoy, the brain is engaged. That engagement lowers the affective filter.
The affective filter?
It's essentially the emotional barrier that prevents learning when you're bored or stressed. If you're having fun, that barrier drops and you learn much faster.
Okay, so we have the input sorted. The brain is absorbing repetitive auditory patterns from pop songs, and it's mapping English vocabulary directly to the visual cortex through these fun hobby videos.
Yes, and we're building those internal shortcuts with the microsentences.
Right. So the next logical step has to be actual spoken output. But here is the biggest roadblock for a lot of students. They don't have an English-speaking environment. They don't live in an English-speaking country, and they don't have a conversation partner.
The source is actually very emphatic about this. A conversation partner is not a prerequisite for practicing output.
Wait, really?
Not at all. The strong recommendation is to speak to yourself out loud, in your room, in your car, or in the shower.
Okay, but just like narrating your life, the specific exercise they outline is live picture description, right?
Exactly. You use your immediate environment as the prompt. So you literally stand in your room and you say out loud, "I see a bed. The bed is big. I have a brown table. The lamp is on. My computer is black."
Or if you're commuting, like on the bus, you look out the window and say, "I see a window. I see a red car. A man is walking."
Yes. And there's also an evening review component they mentioned, where you describe your day out loud before going to sleep. Like, Today I was happy. I ate pasta for lunch.
Which forces the retrieval of past tense vocabulary naturally.
Exactly.
I have to challenge the effectiveness of this one, though. I mean, I joke that it sounds like being a play-by-play Sparks commentator for your own mundane life. But really, describing a brown table to an empty room is an entirely predictable, highly controlled environment.
Sure it is.
An actual conversation with a human being is chaotic. People interrupt you, they use weird slang, they change the subject abruptly. How does talking to yourself in the shower about a brown table actually prepare you for the unpredictable nature of live communication? Won't people just feel crazy doing this?
They might feel silly at first, but it prepares you by freeing up your cognitive bandwidth.
Cognitive bandwidth. Okay, break that down for me.
Think about a live conversation. If your brain is dedicating 90% of its processing power just to retrieve the English word for table, you have virtually zero processing power left to listen to the other person, parse their slang, or, formulate your next complex thought.
Ah, I see. So the solo practice isn't about simulating a real conversation at all.
No, it's about automating the retrieval process. By forcing your brain to instantly retrieve vocabulary based solely on what your eyes see in your room, you are greasing those neural tracks.
So it becomes effortless.
Right. Furthermore, the physical act of speaking out loud creates an auditory feedback loop. Your ears actually need to hear your own voice physically producing the sound.
Why is that so important?
It signals to the brain that these words are active tools for communication, not just passive bits of information stored in a textbook memory file. When the retrieval becomes completely automatic in the shower, you suddenly have the mental bandwidth to handle the chaos of a real live conversation.
That reframes the solo practice entirely for me. It's not a substitute for conversation. It's the physical conditioning required before you step onto the field.
That's a great way to put it.
Which brings us to the logistics of this conditioning. Because doing the micro-sentences, the video consumption, and the solo picture descriptions, it sounds like a massive daily commitment. If a student is already busy and overwhelmed, how do they fit this in without burning out?
This is where the guide's framework becomes highly practical and honestly a relief for a lot of people. The recommendation is a mere 10 to 15 minutes of practice every single day.
Just 10 to 15 minutes? That's it?
That's it. Language learning is inherently a slow, structural change in the brain. It requires small, consistent steps, not massive, exhausting leaps.
It's the concept of spaced repetition over marathon cramming, right? Like, if I sit down and try to study English grammar for 2 straight hours, my brain is going to hit a wall of cognitive fatigue pretty quickly.
Oh, absolutely. The language centers of the brain actually reject new patterns when they are fatigued. 2 hours of exhausted, miserable studying is far less effective than 15 minutes of highly focused, engaged practice.
That makes so much sense.
Consistency with a 10-minute routine builds the pathways without ever triggering that fatigue response. And the source material pairs this 10-minute rule with a very specific, crucial mindset. You must, quote, be kind to your brain.
Be kind to your brain. I love that. But that kindness is really put to the test when a student makes a mistake. Because for a lot of learners, making a mistake out loud feels like a massive failure.
It does. The instinct for most learners when they make an error, like, say, saying something like, I is happy, is to panic. They feel embarrassed, even if they're completely alone in a room.
Yeah, it's like tripping while learning to walk. But tripping isn't a failure. It's just valuable data on how to balance better next time. But the physiological response to that embarrassment is actual stress, right? Cortisol floods the system.
It does. And that stress response is highly detrimental because it literally locks up your memory retrieval. You freeze.
So how do we stop that freeze?
The guide offers a brilliant, simple cognitive reset for this. When you catch an error like I is happy, the recommendation is to simply say to yourself out loud, oh, okay, and calmly correct it to I am happy.
Just, oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
That's it. I love how it strips all the emotional weight away from the error. Like resetting a router instead of throwing the whole computer out the window, you're just dropping the bad connection, acknowledging the error code, and rebooting the sentence.
Exactly. It completely prevents the brain's stress response from activating. Perfectionism is the absolute enemy of fluency because the fear of making a mistake interrupts the practice.
Right, you get paralyzed.
By reframing these common speaking errors as positive, emotionally neutral, oh, okay moments, students accelerate their growth. They maintain their momentum. They stay brave, basically.
And most importantly, it keeps the 10-minute routine from feeling like a daily punishment. Because if the process remains fun and forgiving, you'll actually stick to it.
The entire framework is designed to lower the barriers to entry while maximizing the cognitive efficiency of the time spent.
It really is. Let's trace the full architecture of what we've uncovered today because it's a lot of great stuff.
Let's do it.
So the fundamental barrier to fluency is that native language switchboard operator inside your head. To bypass that, you have to physically build direct neural pathways. You start with the internal monologue, using microsentences to connect real-world sensations directly to English thought.
Right. And then you feed the brain's pattern recognition system with repetitive audio, like simple pop songs.
And you map vocabulary directly to your visual cortex by watching simple, fun hobby videos instead of confusing movies.
Then, crucially, you automate your vocabulary retrieval through solo output. You use your immediate environment for picture descriptions to create that vital auditory feedback loop.
And you sustain this entire process with just 10 to 15 minutes of daily practice, using the "oh, okay" technique to completely short-circuit the stress of making mistakes.
It's a complete sustainable system.
It's a profound shift, really, going from treating English like an academic subject you have to pass to treating it like a physical reflex you're just training over time.
It changes everything about the learning experience.
It really does. So we want to leave you with this final thought to turn over in your mind today. What if the biggest barrier standing between you and English fluency isn't a lack of complex vocabulary and it isn't your grasp of advanced grammar rules? What if the real bottleneck is simply the fear of looking a little bit silly talking to yourself in an empty room? I challenge you right now, wherever you're listening to this, look at whatever object is directly in front of you and just describe it out loud.